My friends, good day. Since we've known each other for a while now, it's high time we had a serious talk about the economy. So I don't have a script, I don't have any paper, I haven't prepared anything, I don't have a teleprompter in front of me, but I'd still like to share a number of ideas with you. When I look at the British, the French, the Americans, and God knows they're suffering right now, I don't think I need to spell it out for you. The decline, the middle classes who can no longer make ends meet, people being laid off in large numbers, inflation, people living in big cities who tell you that even with a six-figure salary, they can't make ends meet. The aging of the car fleet, which has reached record levels, has just surpassed an average of 10 years in the United Kingdom. For cars, this means that households can no longer afford to replace their vehicles. It means these are households that will... Today they are struggling, with the vehicle being just an indicator, isn't it? Today we're in the middle of August. We have vacation spots that are usually crowded, but today they're empty because people can't afford to go on vacation. So people are suffering economically. By the way, that's why people are interested in the economy, because a few years ago, if you talk to them about economics, well, people didn't really care. But today, everyone is interested because they want to understand. Now, when I look at them on social media, I look at the French, I look at the British, for example. Well, what happens is that every time things go wrong, they tell you, yes, that's it. It's the result of us living in a socialist country, or us living in a Marxist country, or even sometimes under communism. In reality, what happened is that simply, while we were picking the pockets of Westerners, while we were making them poorer, and we're just at the beginning, that's, 2025, we'll miss it when we miss it in 5 years. Well, what's happening is that they wanted to deprive them of the narrative. They wanted to deprive them of the intellectual tools to understand what's happening to them. It's a classic, isn't it? All scammers, all swindlers, they want to keep their victims in the dark, in the shadows, so they can't understand, find solutions, or find direction. So, people in the West generally haven't studied, even those who went to university, haven't studied in detail what these words, these labels they use actually mean. And they use them for situations that aren't pleasant, meaning that's what evil is. But why? Because, if you will, in the discourse, in the implicit discourse, even sometimes explicit, it's that the capitalistic system as we see it today, well, it's the quintessence of human evolution. It's the end of history. The history of humanity with a capital H ends here. We have evolved to such a point that we can't imagine any evolution after what we are experiencing now. This system is perfection. It will bring us happiness, it will bring us fulfillment, equality, development, all of that. And anyone who criticizes this system is an enemy from within. And when it doesn't work, when we see the struggles, when we see the homeless, when we see inflation, exactly when we see the standard of living collapsing, when we see poverty among seniors, poverty among young people. You know, in the United Kingdom, for example, I'll tell you right now, a third of children live below the poverty line. It's very simple, 4.5 million poor children in the United Kingdom. And do you know what it means, poor children? That's serious, because you have the old poor person. When you have the 80-year-old guy who is poor, he's 80 years old, he's poor. It means he might not be around in 10 years or 15 years or 20 years. He's there, right? And so he's going to be out of the equation, let's say. Except that the child who is poor has his whole life ahead of him, a whole life of poverty ahead of him. That's much more tragic, isn't it? So when they see that, they say it's socialism, it's Marxism, all that. In reality, it's just a label. I don't know what that means, but it's just a label they put on a situation that seems unacceptable to them. As soon as they see an economic situation that tells them it's unfair, it's not possible, unacceptable, it's not tolerable, it's atrocious, it's something, it's unfair, bam, they'll put the Marxist or socialist label on it, because they're conditioned not to blame what they're experiencing, the capitalistic system. So the capitalistic system, precisely, well, sometimes and today they're behaving like, certain casinos. I saw, when I was a teenager, I saw some illegal gamblers. And actually, what they do is they give money. When someone doesn't want to bet or is broke, they give them money so they'll come back to the table. They do the same thing on an even bigger scale in Vegas. They can send a limo to pick you up at the airport When you're a high roller, they can give you a free suite. In a hotel, they can send you to a Michelin-starred chef. But why do they do that? Do they do it for your well-being? Do they do it because they genuinely like you? No, they do it to get you into their system. In a way, they're corrupting you. They're corrupting you so they can devour you later. So what we're experiencing today is the same thing with the Western capitalist system. It means that people have been corrupted with fleeting elements of well-being. Well, you have the car, you have the microwave bought on installment, the car also bought on credit, you have the house also paid for on credit, you have the vacation on the credit card. The credit card actually came later. At first, we enjoyed the credit system. In general, we didn't lend to people. We lent to businesses, we lent to companies, we lent to entrepreneurs, we lent to shopkeepers. We didn't lend to regular people so they could buy shoes, a bag, or things like that. That wasn't done. It's actually fairly recent in financial history. Actually, what happened is that when people started to lose their social status, we gave them credit, which allows people to watch each other. We know how that works socially, and so we lend them money so they can maintain the illusion of their standard of living. But in reality, if you look at the standard of living in absolute numbers, in real terms, if you take away the credit, the standard of living is collapsing. So, what did we do? We bribed them. Just like you bribe a compulsive gambler, we bribe them with a little money, with a few perks, to show them that the system is great so they would accept it, participate in it, and even defend it. Today, what you are seeing in the West is not a socialist or Marxist system. You are witnessing the downward path or decline of capitalism. Capitalism is collapsing. In fact, it's not even really collapsing. It's working as designed. It's working normally, just as it's supposed to work. That means working for the interests of a tiny fraction of society and then crushing everyone else. Everyone else becomes exploitable. Everyone else has to give everything so that a minority can enjoy everything. By the way, for a very long time, the high priests of capitalism accused Marxism of wanting to destroy private property. They say they're against private property, they're for collectivism, private property is forbidden. Here's a question I'm asking you today. Maybe 10 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, I couldn't have asked this question, but I'm asking you this question today. Look at your life. How's private property going? Is it okay? Is it working out? Question, private property. Do you have a lot of private property? Actually, what we're seeing is that the capitalist system is abolishing private property because the majority of people have absolutely nothing, and the few things they do have, well, those are simply things they've bought on credit, or things that are falling apart in their hands and they have nothing. Okay? So the capitalist system is actually a system that abolishes private property. But for the majority, the corollary is that the existence of private property for an ultra minority means that private property must be abolished for the majority. So the majority must give up absolutely everything so that a minority can benefit from everything. And the more we move forward, the more inequalities widen. The widening of inequalities is not an accident, it's not a temporary crisis, it's not something that happens and then next year it will be better. No, that's not it. The system will move more and more toward its quintessence. It will move toward its fullness. What does that mean? More and more people. There, I told you, a third of children live below the poverty line in the United Kingdom. Well, maybe in 5 years it will be half. And in 10 years, it will be 2/3, and so on. That's part of the system. It's not an accident. It's not a deviation. It's really built in by design. So you need to know one thing. In the past, there were different economic systems that were organized, different forms of societies that existed. For example, we had feudalism. And when feudalism collapsed simply because at a certain point, capitalism was emerging, and then capitalism, which was mainly driven by the Industrial Revolution, brought down feudalism, even though all of this didn't happen everywhere on the planet at the same time, etc. But there were struggles, there was unrest, and everything that caused society to move from one system to another. Well, if you look, feudalism, there were a lot of people who said it was great back when it existed. If you look at slavery, for example, it lasted for centuries and centuries. Generations lived through slavery. And slavery, like any system, had three types of positions, three types of stances. There were the apologists for slavery. At the time, they said that slavery was something great. They didn't see any, I don't see what's wrong with it. Usually it was either people who benefited from it, right? Or people who were ignorant, useful idiots who said, I don't see the problem with slavery, and that's why it lasted so long. Slavery didn't last for centuries and centuries, even millennia, just by chance. It had a very high level of acceptance in society. Then, a little further on, we find the reformers. The reformers are people who say, yes, well, I have nothing against slavery. It's still a good system, but it needs to be improved. Improving it means I would like the slave to maybe have more rest time. Maybe we should stop mistreating him. Maybe we should take better care of him, feed him better, all that. So that's someone who isn't fundamentally, but it's someone who wants to give it a human face. For slavery, a human face. You'll find at the other end of the spectrum, you'll find the radicals. You'll find the radicals, those who will say, well, we don't want slavery, we don't want a human face or anything at all, it's abolition or nothing. You see, you have the three systems, you have the three intellectual approaches, if you want. And today, regarding capitalism, the capitalistic system, we have the three visions. You have people who say, yeah, but well, it's great, it's even good, it allows people to, etc. Except that the people defending it use the same tired arguments we've heard many times before. These are arguments that, well, the further we go, the less they hold up. That means that back when capitalism was in its rising phase, if you will, maybe their arguments, even if they were shaky, you could say that, practically speaking, they had some merit. Except that today, the more time goes on, the more indefensible it becomes, in a way, all right? We also have the intermediaries, we also have the people who are actually the reformers, who say we need to reform, we need more equality, we need this, we need that. And of course, at our end, we find the radicals who say this system must collapse because this system isn't working. Like I told you earlier, I said yes, for example, in criticism, Marxism, yes, it brings collectivism and all that. I'll just tell you something very simple. In the United Kingdom, the state sold the companies that supply water. That means it's not the companies that supply the water. It means at first the supply of water to homes was a state monopoly. That means a monopoly for us, the people, because precisely normally, under normal circumstances, the state is the embodiment of the people. It's not the embodiment of the forces of money. But still, with my Marxist sensibility, I tend to see the state more as a kind of committee that's there to manage the affairs of the ruling classes. It's not. The state isn't managing your affairs or mine. It's managing the affairs of the bankers. It's managing the affairs of the oligarchy that it has been captured by. And you don't have a say. I mean, once every 4 years, every 5 years, every 7 years, they'll come in front of you like this, they'll parade, they'll have a cockfight, and then give you the impression that you're voting and so on. But the rest of the time, they don't care. The rest of the time, they don't care. If you go outside and shout your dissatisfaction and everything, they'll send the riot police and they'll spray you, and after that it'll calm you down, that's all. I mean, you understand that, you see that. Let's be clear, I've said it several times in interviews, on channels, etc. In interviews, I clearly stated my position. Okay, Marxist leaning, but where I might differ, maybe with Karl Marx, is that he's rather quite statist, isn't he, in his approach to things. Whereas I am ultra-anarchist, so I don't want a state. I prefer a minimal state, a state whose only prerogative is taking out the household trash, because the stronger the state, and by the way, that ties in with what the president was saying. It's the third president of the United States, Jefferson, the Jeffersonians, who are not necessarily Marxists, who are not necessarily anarchists, But he said, what's the natural predator of the citizen? Who is it? It's the state. The state is the natural predator. By the way, that's where, for example, the Second Amendment in the United States comes from, which allows Americans to bear arms. Americans don't carry weapons to defend themselves against thieves. You should know, a lot of Americans don't know this. I was talking the other day with an American friend. He asked me, why do Americans have the right in their constitution to bear arms? Why was that put in place? I told him it was so they could defend themselves against their government. He told me, you know that most Americans get it wrong. Actually, the idea behind the American Constitution was not to have an armed government facing an unarmed population. Because from the perspective of the founding fathers of the United States, the government is the natural predator of the citizens. Today, for example, if you take the United Kingdom, the state has become a transmission belt between financial interest, moneyed interest, between private companies, all that, and the taxpayer. It takes our money and it distributes it to private interests. And then, well, if you don't agree, you resist, they send you to the police, they seize your assets, etc. And you'll see. And they give your money to private interests. You understand what I mean? The state is the natural predator of the citizens. And that's why, for example, I ask the state to restore justice. I'm not going to ask the state to improve things. Because the more I make requests to the state, the more I give it, at least morally, I give it more power, more prerogatives. I prefer a state that disappears from my life. I prefer a state that's as pathetic as possible, as broke as possible, a state that stays in its corner with no power at all. Let's get back to the story I was telling you. The story of water. So we're in a collectivist system because water is still a resource that must remain a common good. Water shouldn't be used by speculators. It shouldn't be used so that some people can hold us hostage, right? It's still the foundation. We should, and that's where I think this part of capitalism must collapse. It must be destroyed. It must go. I'm pretty radical. I'll explain it to you later. I'll give an example if you want. When you look at the system, what is it? What's the foundation of being human? What does a human need? Well, there are fundamental needs, and these fundamental needs should not be open to speculation, should not be open to the market, should not be open to competition. These needs must be available and sold at cost price for everyone. Now, we have water, right? We need it, we die without water. What's happening? The British government is going to privatize the water supply. So they're going to create a multitude of companies that compete with each other. It's the same water, you turn on the tap, it's the same water that comes out. Where's the competition? All right, we have competition, and in reality, what's going to happen with competition is that you'll have a lot of companies fighting each other. And of course, I said it on our channel, but I'll repeat it to you. What's the purpose of competition in capitalism? What's the stated goal? It's precisely to allow choice so that there are options, so we can choose between here, here, or here as consumers. Yes, but that's a lie, because that's only during the upward phase. That's during the upward phase of capitalism. But once it has reached its goal, it will show you its true face. The true face is that competition, free competition, leads to what? Free competition will lead to monopoly. Why? Because when we have systems that compete with each other, what is their goal? Their goal is to crush the competitor. Their goal is to crush the other. It's to dominate the market. And in this domination, anything goes. All right? So we don't have to play fair. Once we've crushed the competitors, what happens to the citizen? He no longer has a choice. Now we're back to a monopoly. We're back to a monopolistic or almost monopolistic situation where we have one or two big players who take over the whole market, and this time sell at a very high price. They're going to raise the prices, and this time the water coming out of the tap, the prices will keep going up non-stop, non-stop, non-stop. And you'll be funding with your shower, you'll be funding when you brush your teeth, you'll be funding hedge funds, traders who are in Australia, and so on. That's it. You're basically funding the whole planet. You have to deprive yourself, you have to bleed yourself dry for water bills. It was incredible 20 years ago. Today it's like this because you're the one funding it. That's it. That's what's happening. It's the internal contradictions. It's the internal contradictions of the capitalistic system. They've been known since 2025. They've literally been known since the beginning. You see, there's Proudhon, Joseph Proudhon, who wrote a book called The Philosophy of Poverty. The Philosophy of Poverty. He's more of a reformer. And he actually wanted to humanize things. In his book, he mentions a number of contradictions of capitalism, like the ones I just gave you. Even the ones I just gave you, you'll also find them in the previous century. You'll find them a few decades earlier with Adam Smith. In reality, when you look at the economic literature, people quote each other, talk about each other's ideas, and so on. But there aren't always clear citations. If you look, for example, in Karl Marx's Capital, he talked about a lot of things. Sometimes he quotes David Ricardo, Adam Smith, and others, but sometimes he doesn't quote them and may use or discuss their ideas without citing. So the economic conversation is a long conversation that spans centuries. So the book he wrote, Proudhon, I think it's 1846, I think, or 1845, let's say 1846. He wrote his book, The Philosophy of Poverty, in 1846. A year later, someone else is going to respond to him. It's Karl Marx. In 1847, he will publish a book that he will call The Poverty of Philosophy, and he will respond to him. And here we have a very interesting dialogue. We have this brutal confrontation, not between an apologist for capitalism, but rather we have a difference between the one who is in the middle, the one who wants to humanize, a reformer. We have a reformer facing a radical, facing someone who is absolutely against it, a radical. And we see that the distance between the reformer and the radical is sometimes much greater than between the reformer and the apologist. So the radical really is extremely far away. So just to let you know, when we say Marxist, what does Marxist mean? Because precisely we've used it in all sorts of ways, and indeed the word has been used so much that it means different things to different people in different countries at different times in history, right? No, let me tell you, we have to go back to the roots. What are the roots? We have Karl Marx, who is a German living in London. He found refuge there because he was expelled from Germany. He went to France. After that, I think he went to Brussels. After that, he lived the longest part of his life there. He stayed. He died in London. So he fled to London because he had taken a stand for a number of workers' causes. We are in the 1800s, shortly after the start of the Industrial Revolution. So basically, the Industrial Revolution began in 1760. The birth of Karl Marx is 1818. So he was born roughly 60 years after the start of the Industrial Revolution. When the guy is 40 years old, roughly, the Industrial Revolution has been going on for about a century. And so he will have a front row seat to observe it, to see a little bit what it is doing. And he will begin his work called Capital, or Critique of Political Economy. He will write this work, part of which will be published posthumously. And actually, he will offer a critique of the capitalist system. So let me tell you something. You can't criticize capitalism. You can't criticize, for example, the grip of the banksters. He called them banksters in his book. The grip of the banksters on the economy. You can't criticize the oligarchy. You can't criticize slavery, exploitation, the length of the workday, all that. Even corporate toxicity, you won't be able to criticize it without stumbling upon something, which was said in Capital, in the book by Karl Marx, and which was said and explained, detailed, refined, and very often with numbers and charts and all that. That's why if you try to criticize the current situation without looking into Capital, you'll just be trying to reinvent the wheel. What's extraordinary about this book is that it was published towards the end of the 1800s. It was published again later. Friedrich Engels, who is a friend of his, basically published it after 1880 with different prefaces depending on the countries, the editions and all that. In fact, you can see that today this book hasn't aged a bit. That's the miracle of this book. It hasn't aged a bit because it detailed a certain number of mechanisms. That means Karl Marx had this capacity for abstraction That means he's going to describe practical, real situations that he sees right in front of him, like children working in chimneys, like the 1833 law in the United Kingdom. When we said that we need to regulate, not ban, but regulate child labor. And then you have the employers coming out saying, yes, it's unacceptable, it's against the freedom to do business and all that. Well, he will observe all that, but he will also then break down the mechanisms in an abstract way, which can sometimes make the book difficult to read. But in general, it's quite easy and quite fluid. So here we are today, and we see that it hasn't aged a bit. We could write something later, but everything is already there. It hasn't aged, which is extraordinary. When we say Marxist sometimes in interviews here and there on the left, I said that I was a Marxist. It was in the sense of being critical of the current economy. All right? Marx doesn't provide a solution. He won't provide a solution. But the solutions, that's the case with all critics. The solutions are often implied. Yes, he will criticize, but if you read between the lines, there might be a hint of a solution. Nothing explicit, just criticism implied. Go ahead if you want to read them. Afterwards, various revolutions and different countries embraced the Marxist doctrine, and then they adapted it in their own way. You see, some adapted it in the form of industrial revolutions, others as an agrarian revolution, and others in different ways. But actually, at the core, you'll find this in Vietnam, in China, in Cuba, and in the USSR, with results that are sometimes positive, sometimes negative. Today, if you look at China, it's the largest, the greatest economic power in the world. Today, I'm sorry, it's purely, it's a country where people know by heart the doctrines and criticisms of Karl Marx. You see what I mean? Whereas facing them, we have the capitalistic system that has, yes, that's true. It advanced. It was able to send satellites. It was able at some point to show that it could accomplish 2 or 3 things, except that today it's in complete collapse. And the world power that's coming, I mean, we just haven't noticed it. It's China, that's all. We haven't seen it yet. We haven't realized it. We haven't integrated it into our thinking yet. Europe is finished. It's washed up. Europe is over. That's it. The turning point, let's say the civilizational turning point, was missed, quite simply. In everything that is cutting edge technology, the technologies that will shape tomorrow, the technologies equivalent to the discovery of electricity, right? Europe isn't there. It's busy moralizing. It's stuck in rigid positions. It's busy lecturing the whole world about regulating, banning, and so on. But in the long run, there is no future for Europe. In all this, the real game is being played between the United States and China. China is an example of a successful communist country. You see, so I would say, oh, really, Cuba? Oh, yes, Cuba. Let's add Cuba too. That's 60 years of embargo too. That doesn't help. I mean, a lot like North Korea. Well, embargo. And despite all that, they still manage to do things. Because of the embargo, so in reality, many countries that try to do something other than unfettered capitalism, the countries that didn't want to open their markets, that didn't want to allow liberalization, what we call economic liberalization, the liberalization of the market, they were crushed. They were crushed under bombs. They had color revolutions. They had coups, and when coups couldn't be done, they had embargoes and all that. You see what I mean? To not allow any experiments other than the current capitalist experiment. And in relation to the so-called free market, free trade, in Marx's book, he says that all freedoms will be reduced to a single freedom, which is the freedom of free trade. Okay, that's what we see today. We are literally losing freedom every day. Every day that passes, we are sinking into the surveillance society, into the permission society, into the coercion society, into the authorization society, into the control society. And every time technology takes a leap forward, every time technology moves ahead and brings a new invention, something new, what happens? Well, of course, it gets armed, it gets weaponized, as they say, it gets armed, it becomes a weapon that's used against us. So in reality, all our freedoms are reduced to free trade, the freedom to do business. Mercantile exchange. We will become countries. We are becoming countries of buyers, sellers, countries of people who are in debt, borrowers and those in debt. Isn't it lenders and those in debt? You see what I mean? We're actually moving toward this reality. And what's terrible about the story of the free market is that for a long time, Westerners, and it's still the case, let's not call it, how should I put it, capitalistic hypocrisy. For a very long time, they told people, countries, right? You have to open your market, allow competition, allow openness, stop overregulation, stop central planning, and so on. The common agricultural policy, what is it if not central planning? The common fisheries policy, what is it if not central planning? All the laws that are churned out every day, right? Even the Trump tariffs, what are they if not market manipulation? You see, I mean, actually, the so-called capitalist economy has never been free. It's an economy that always depends on the state and central planning, but central planning in its own interest, central planning precisely in the interest of the forces of money. So we're playing with two sets of rules and we change them. Well, when it suits the oligarchy, when the oligarchy needs to have free reign, they'll say, no, listen, we can't intervene in the market, no. We have to be a liberal economy. May the best win. They'll bring out that speech. You know that speech. As soon as things turn out differently, we show up and we start putting in tariffs, putting in rules, putting in laws, stuff, procedures, blockages. That's exactly to lock things down. It's the same. Look at 2008 when the banks collapsed. What did we do? Well, we took money from the state coffers. We gave the money to the bankers. We told them, oh, you lost the money. All right, well, no problem. Here you go. Come back and play again, okay? You can see that we always have a system with two double standards and it keeps changing. The double standards keep changing all the time. So the countries that, for example, used to give lessons on liberalism to the global south about opening markets and so on, today have extremely closed markets, highly regulated and so on. So you see what I mean? It's actually a narrative that keeps changing depending on the season. All right, so my friends, that's basically what I wanted to tell you, that in the Marxist sense, I am a critic of capitalism. I'm not offering a solution. I don't claim to tell you, hold on, I found a solution. I don't make that claim. I'm not trying to sell you communism, sell you socialism, or sell you any other system. Not at all. That's not my goal. That's not my ideology. That's not my approach to things. On the other hand, what I'm telling you is that I am, if you will, completely in line with the early Marxist logic. That means in its fundamental sense. That means its fundamental sense. What does that mean? It means a critique of capitalism. So I am extremely critical of the capitalistic system that is currently leading us toward a situation of inequality and privilege. For some, which we may not have seen since the pyramids were built, so either we start thinking about it today or we start collectively imagining a different future, a future where we are not forced to work, to live, just to provide, isn't it, the fruit of our labor to the banksters and to give it to an oligarchy that profits from our most vital needs. We need to have a roof over our heads. They're there to profit. We need water. They profit from it. We need healthcare. They profit from it. We need to take our children to school. They're there. They profit from it. I mean, we have to stop with this kind of society. It's a form of society that's making us collectively poorer. We're creating trillionaires on one side and we're creating millions of people who are starving, right? I'm not saying we should take from some and give to others. I'm against redistribution, state distribution. Why? Because once again, like I say in the video, I'm an anarchist. Okay, anarchist simply means I'm someone who believes that without the state, we have a better order of things. Things work much better. Without the state, without civil servants, without those who bring coercion, and you say, no, you do it like this, you do it like that. No, I am a free human. I am a sensible human. I am a thoughtful human. I am responsible for my decisions. I don't need to have a civil servant telling me what time I can eat my dessert and what time I have to go to bed. I don't need that. All right, so I'm not here for that. And actually, To be honest with you, it's completely absurd asking the state to restore justice by taking from here and then redistributing there what I ask of the state. Because the inequalities we experience are actually mediated by the state. That means it's the responsibility of the state because, once again, the state is a committee that's there to manage the affairs and interests of the dominant classes. So, if we have a state that works for the oligarchy, well, obviously, you have a society where 99% of people are getting poorer while 1% tell you. We've never bought so many sports cars, we've never traveled so much by private jet. It's because of the state, it's the state that's taking from the majority, well, not directly taking from the majority, but what it's doing is creating unequal conditions, changing the rules of the game to favor an ultra minority. Like, for example, they're going to force small shops to close to allow large international groups to open supermarkets. You see, they're going to crush the United Kingdom, for example. They literally turn it into 2D, into a war zone. You walk in a British city center, what do you see? I'll tell you right now. You see phone repair shops, you see shops that sell suitcases, you see bubble tea shops, you see vaping shops, you see betting shops, you see nail salons, you see stores that sell everything for £1, everything must go, that's it, and maybe a kebab place in between. That's what British city centres look like. And more barbers, Turkish barbers opening everywhere. They're not any more Turkish than you or me, but we get it. So all this is because of state destruction. It's the state and even the local authorities who are part of the state. Local authorities are still the state, so they're the ones blocking the arrival of customers. Who will take away your parking spaces? Who will close roads? Who will create traffic jams? Who will put cameras everywhere? Who will say you're not allowed to turn there? Then there's a camera over there. Who will take money from you if you do it? A behavioral tax. Since when do they have the right to take behavioral taxes from us? So do it, don't do it. You don't have the right, you can't do it. They've terrorized the customers so much that people are closing down. Isn't that right? Businesses that were the heart of the city that had been there for generations sometimes have closed down. I've seen businesses that had been open for 120 years close down. I've seen businesses where inside there's a board with photos, black and white photos, showing you when their ancestor opened the store in 1910 what? And you see that they're going to close, right? And then you have a vape shop with stuff for vaping instead, right? So it's a destruction. We don't need the state to restore justice. We don't need it to restore things. We need them to disappear. We need them to stop rigging the games, to stop rigging the game for the interests of an oligarchy. That's it. She doesn't want to say, save me. I won't ask the one who caused the problem for help. It makes no sense. They caused the problem, so how can I trust them to help me? All right, so there you go, my friends. I think today we really need to think seriously, think in a revolutionary way. All right, we shouldn't be thinking in terms of just improving things. In any case, personally, at my level, I've made the decision I'm no longer following that logic. Yes, we can improve, we can polish things a little here, we can patch things up. Otherwise, I'm in a revolutionary mindset. This has to stop. I want it to stop. Everything that has been sold off, for example, like I gave you the example of water, it needs to be seized, it needs to be nationalized. That's it, period. Nationalize it. That's it. It's back under state control. And we put constitutional amendments in place to forbid for all time that it can be sold, that people can profit from our water if it's a basic human need or right. In the United States, there was a system and an algorithmic system. Or the roof for humans. Humans need a roof, the roof for humans. It shouldn't be there to allow some people to buy a helicopter or to allow some people from two sides to build a castle. No, well, what we did is that we created an algorithmic rent management system to make you compete with each other. You see, to manage rent algorithmically, to maximize value extraction, that means to maximize the rent. Rents have skyrocketed, you see, through layers of algorithms in an inhuman way between the shoe and the algorithm. It's enough. We have to stop all this. Do you feel like speculating? Well, speculate on perfume or speculate on pearl necklaces if you want. No problem. We'll make money with that person. You say not to do that. But humans, basic human needs, that has to stop. In the United Kingdom, the British went and sold hospital parking lots. They sold them to foreign investor groups. He has to pay at the hospital at 3 a.m. with a child who has a fever of 104. Amounts that keep increasing every 3 months, the prices go up. He has to pay Australian investor groups or a hedge fund from New York that bought square kilometers of parking lots in the country. And at that point, wherever a car stops, you park in your own country, right? We'll discuss that soon. Park in your own country. Every time you turn off the engine, you have to pay foreigners. Is that normal? Is it normal to pay people a rent? You have to pay a rent because you parked in your country? Is that normal? So to finish on something regarding Marxism, I'll tell you what we're sometimes criticized for. Sometimes people say, yes, but they're anti-national, because sometimes people who have a nationalistic spirit say, yeah, I don't like Marxists because they're against the idea of a nation. That's not true. It's a misunderstanding. In Marxism, what is the idea of a nation? You don't have a nation. That's why Marxism is always in an international struggle. There are no borders. If you will, it's not globalism. But as I've often said, it's that sometimes people ask me, love, but why do you're Algerian, British, you live in Mauritius, you talk about problems happening in France. Explain to us a bit why this thing. Yes, since the problems are global, the solutions must be global too. But the reality is that the Marxist struggle is a struggle without borders. It's an international struggle. Evil knows no borders, and neither does the enemy. So we shouldn't have borders either. Let me add something else. Why do Marxists say you don't have a country? It's not that they don't want you to have a country. They're not opposed to you having a country. It's just that you don't have one. They notice that you don't have one. That's it. They don't want to take your country from you. Marxists don't want to take away your identity as French, Swiss, Belgian, or Canadian. They don't want to take that from you. That was already taken from you. It's been taken for generations. Since time immemorial, it's been taken. You see what I mean? You keep saying, this is my country. Fine. That's fine. If it helps you, if you feel good saying that, well, say it. I'm not going to challenge you on that. All right? But the reality is your country only needs you on 2 occasions. France, you're French. France is your country on only 2 occasions. When you need to give your blood, when there's a war started by the oligarchy, they need you to go die for them. So that's when it's your country. That's when you have the right to have a French flag and say, long live France. But try hanging a flag on your apartment in normal times. Go ahead, do it. Make my day. Go ahead, do it. Hang a French flag on your balcony and you'll see what happens. All right? Okay? You don't have the right otherwise. France is your country. When you have to give your blood and when you have to give your money, when the tax bill comes in, then yes. Then it's your country. The rest of the time, no. The rest of the time, you have Bill Gates arriving at Le Bourget Airport in his private jet to give lessons. The motorcycle cops wait for him and take him to the Élysée. He's received like a head of state. He's American, you know. You arrive by car without an emissions sticker and get kicked out. See what I mean? This isn't your country. They took it from you. So, as a Marxist, if you want to take back your country and make it yours again, I support you. Of course, I support you. Okay? That's why I support sovereignist efforts. I support nationalist efforts. Of course, I'm not with extremes have never been for the extremes. Okay? But that's why I have this connection with people who support this. I agree you should reclaim your country, but I want you to truly do it. That you take back control of your country comprehensively, in a complete way, all around 360 degrees. That you take back control in a truly sovereign way on all levels. But right now, in the current state of things, I'm telling you, and it's very bad news, I'm sorry. If you didn't know before, you don't have a country. It was taken from you, okay? All of that is over. Not even yours. When you were born, you already didn't have it, okay? So there you go. What can we say? I started this conversation with you. I didn't know where it would lead us. Well, there you go. Now it's good that things have been said. If you have questions, leave them in the comments. I want to answer more because this is the most important topic. We can talk about a lot of things, but you'll see that they all come back to this topic, all of them. They all lead back to this. So ask questions, and then for me, it will give me some markers, it will give me some direction for the next ideas, okay? Thank you for watching this video up to this point, and I'll see you in the next one. See you very soon.